I am 105 years old, and I'm going to tell you something that my doctors never told me. Something that was sitting in peer-reviewed journals the entire time I was lying in a nursing home bed at 67 years old, waiting to die. There is a single ingredient. You can buy it for less than $1 a day, and when you add it to your morning coffee, it does three things at the same time that every doctor I ever saw told me were impossible after 60. It wakes up the stem cells your body quietly stopped producing while you weren't paying attention. It cuts off the exact fuel supply that cancer cells depend on to keep multiplying. And it burns the fat packed around your organs, the dangerous kind they call visceral fat, faster than nearly any other dietary intervention that has ever been studied in a clinical trial. I know how that sounds. I was a skeptical woman my whole life. I did not believe things easily, and I did not trust people who promised too much, but I also buried 3 friends before their time who never heard what I'm about to tell you. And I'm still here gardening and cooking my own meals and walking 2 miles every morning. So, I'm going to ask you to give me 5 minutes before you make up your mind. The reason your doctor has never once mentioned this toyu has nothing to do with conspiracy or secrecy. It has everything to do with the fact that the research proving it works is only now making its way into medical school curricula, while it has been sitting quietly in peer-reviewed journals for years, waiting for someone to read it out loud to the people who needed it most. I am reading it to you now, and before you tell yourself that I must be some kind of genetic anomaly, some rare biological lottery winner who simply got lucky, I want you to hear me out, because I spent 15 years of my life believing exactly that. I spent 15 years giving all the credit to the foods I was eating, the supplements I was taking, the protocols I was following from doctors and research papers and health videos on the internet. And those things helped. Those things are real, and I'm going to tell you about them today in detail, every single one. But at the end of this video, I am going to tell you the thing that none of those foods and none of those protocols could have accomplished alone. I am going to tell you the thing that my friend showed me when I was lying in a hospital bed at 67 years old, preparing myself to die. And I'm warning you now, it is going to sound strange. It is going to sound like something an old woman says when her mind has started to wander. But I am 105 years old. I have all my faculties, and I have watched every single one of my friends who ignored. These part of the equation leave this earth decades before they needed to. Let me start at the beginning. When I was 60 years old and they told me I had pancreatic cancer, I did not accept it quietly. I fought it the way I had always fought everything in my life, which was hard, constant, and without a single moment of peace. I had 3 surgeries. I went through chemotherapy that made me feel like my bones were made of broken glass. I tried every medication they put in front of me. I watched health videos for hours every night on my laptop, taking notes like I was back in university. I followed protocols. I cut out sugar. I started eating more vegetables. I took every supplement that any credible sounding source suggested. And for a while I improved. But then I would plateau, then I would backslide. Then I would improve again and backslide again. For 7 years I went back and forth, in and out of remission, in and out of treatment. And gradually the cancer stopped responding to the things that had worked before. By 67, the doctors had run out of new options to offer. That was when they moved me into the nursing home. That was when my children started visiting more frequently and staying for shorter amounts of time, which is what children do when they know something is ending. I was ready to go. I genuinely was. I had made my peace. I had organized my papers. I had written letters to people I needed to write letters to. And then one afternoon in October, a woman walked into my room at the nursing home and stood at the foot of my bed and looked at me like she was genuinely confused by what she saw. Her name was Evelyn. We had been friends in college 45 years earlier, and she looked, I am not exaggerating this, she looked like she was 50 years old. She was 73 at the time. She had the posture of a dancer and the skin of someone who had never known a difficult season in their life. She sat down next to me and she said, "Barbara Sue, what happened to you?" I told her all of it, and then she told me something that changed every single thing. But I promised I would get to the foods first because the foods are real and they work, and too many people over 60 are still eating in ways that are practically feeding their own illness without knowing it. Let me tell you what I learned over 20 years of studying this, what actually worked and why. Because after the cancer went away, I became obsessed with understanding the mechanisms. I read the research. I talked to physicians who were thinking differently about metabolic medicine. And eventually, science caught up to what my body had been telling me for years. The single most important addition I made to my morning routine, the one that changed my energy, my weight, my brain clarity, and my blood work faster than anything else, was adding C8 MCT oil to my morning coffee. I know that sounds simple. I know it sounds like something you have heard before and dismissed. I dismissed it too for years. Let me tell you what it actually does, because until I understood the mechanism, I did not take it seriously enough to do it consistently. MCT oil stands for medium-chain triglyceride oil. Most of the fat you eat, the fat in olive oil, in nuts, in meat, has long carbon chains that your body processes slowly, packages into particles, sends through the lymphatic system, and frequently stores as body fat before it ever gets burned for energy. MCT oil is different. At a structural level, the carbon chains are shorter. The fat absorbs directly through the portal vein into the liver and converts almost immediately into molecules called ketones, specifically a molecule called beta-hydroxybutyrate, BHB. Now, here is the part that matters. Not all MCT oils are the same. The fraction you want is called C8, caprylic acid. It converts to ketones faster than any other fraction and is well tolerated by most people. The cheap MCT oils on the market are mostly C12, lauric acid, which behaves more like a long-chain fat and does not give you the same benefits. Read the label. Look for pure C8 or a C8 and C10 blend. It will cost a little more. It is worth every penny. I start every single morning with 1 tablespoon of C8 MCT oil blended into my coffee. I use a small handheld frother and blend it for about 20 seconds until it looks like a creamy latte. I drink it before I eat anything. I do not eat my first meal until 2 to 3 hours later. This morning window, when your insulin is at its lowest after overnight sleep, is when the MCT oil does its most powerful work. Here is what it is doing while you are sitting with that cup of coffee thinking you were just waking up. The ketones it produces activate a protein called PGC1 alpha, which is the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. Your mitochondria are the power generators inside every cell. After 60, most people have lost 40 to 50% of their mitochondrial density. Research shows that regular MCT oil supplementation triggers the creation of new mitochondria. After 2 months of consistentus, studies measured 28% more mitochondria in muscle tissue and a 25% increase in measurable energy capacity. That is not a minor change. That is the difference between needing a nap every afternoon and feeling genuinely capable again. The ketones also maintain what researchers call stem cell quiescence. Your stem cells are your body's repair crew. By 65, most people are running their repair systems at 30% capacity. BHB, the ketone from MCT oil, has been shown to preserve stem cells in a protected resting state, keeping them viable and ready to respond when tissue needs to be repaired. Harvard researchers confirmed this mechanism. The molecular pathway runs through an enzyme called HDX3. This is not theoretical. This is measured in human biological samples, and here is the cancer piece, which obviously matters most to me personally. Cancer cells have a metabolic addiction to glucose. Every cancer researcher worth listening to knows about the Warburg effect, named after Otto Warburg, who won the Nobel Prize in 1931 for discovering that cancer cells consume glucose at a rate 10-50 times higher than normal cells and ferment it into lactate even when oxygen is available. Cancer cells cannot efficiently use ketones for energy. Their mitochondria are too dysfunctional. When you elevate your ketone level and reduce your circulating glucose, you create an environment where your healthy cells thrive on the alternative fuel, and cancer cells are starved of the fuel they depend on. I am not telling you MCT oil cures cancer. I am telling you it shifts your metabolic environment in a direction that is fundamentally hostile to cancer cell growth and survival. That shift was part of my recovery. I am certain of it. The caffeine in the coffee is not incidental either. Caffeine independently increases fat oxidation by approximately 29% by mobilizing stored fat from adipose tissue into the bloodstream. The problem is that if your body has no immediate demand for that mobilized fat, it circulates and gets stored again. MCT-derived ketones create the metabolic demand that captures and burns the fat the caffeine releases. Research measuring the combined effect found that together they produced 51% more fat oxidation than caffeine alone, and over 120% more than either compound in isolation. The mechanisms are complementary. One releases stored fuel, the other creates the furnace to burn it. I also want to talk about muscle because this is something no one told me when I was in my 60s and I wish they had. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle, affects 30% of people by 60 and 70% of people over 80. When you lose muscle, you lose the metabolically active tissue that regulates your blood sugar, supports your immune system, and research now confirms strongly predict survival outcomes in cancer patients. MCT oil is anti-catabolic. The BHB it produces signals your body that energy is available and that breaking down muscle for glucose is unnecessary. It also activates muscle protein synthesis through a pathway that does not require an insulin spike. A study published in Nutrition and Metabolism in 2019 followed 40 adults between 55 and 75 on identical calorie deficits with identical exercise programs. The only difference was that one group added 14 g of MCT oil per day. After 12 weeks, the MCT group lost 2 kg of fat and gained nearly a kilogram of lean muscle simultaneously. The control group lost fat, but also lost muscle, gaining muscle while losing fat at the same time in people over 55, using only a dietary addition. That study changed how I think about what is actually possible at any age. Start with 1 TSP, add it to your morning coffee, blend it. Do not just stir it. Blending creates an emulsion that absorbs properly. Pour it straight in and stir with a spoon, and the oil floats on the surface, and most of the benefit is lost. Start with 1 TSP for 4 days, then increase to 1 tablespoon. Give your liver time to adjust, or you will experience digestive upset that will make you quit. And quitting is the only way this does not work. Pair it with simple resistance exercise 2 or 3 times a week, not extreme exercise. Bodyweight squats, resistance bands, anything that puts load on the major muscle groups. Eat 30 g of protein within 2 hours after your workout. This combination, MCT oil, resistance training, and adequate protein, gives your body every signal it needs to rebuild the tissue that aging has been eroding for decades. I did all of this, every piece of it, consistently for years, and it worked. My energy came back. My weight stabilized, my blood work improved, my triglycerides dropped, my inflammatory markers normalized. My doctor once called me out of curiosity. He said he had not seen numbers like mine in a woman my age in 30 years of practice, and I smiled at him, and I said, "Doctor, you are looking at 30% of the answer. Now I'm going to tell you the other 70%, and if you close this video right now, I understand. But if you stay, and if you are open to hearing what I'm about to say, I believe it may be the most important thing you hear all year." When Evelyn walked into my room at the nursing home in October of the year I was supposed to die, she sat down and she looked at my face, and she said something that nobody had said to me in 7 years of illness. She did not say, "You poor thing." She did not say, "You are so strong." She said, "Barbara Sue, your body always knows what your mind is doing." Evelyn had been practicing something called Falun Dafa for over 15 years. I had never heard of it. She explained that it was a practice rooted in the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and that it had changed her understanding of what the human body actually is. She told me something that a physicist could not have said better. She told me that the body I see in the mirror is not what my body actually is. That if you looked at my hand under a powerful enough microscope, you would not see solid matter. You would see particles in motion. Go deeper still, and those particles resolve into electromagnetic waves, energy moving at frequencies. This is not philosophy. This is what quantum physics describes when it looks at the foundation of physical matter. The environment around you, she said, is the same. The physical world is also waves, and here is what she told me that stopped my breath in my chest. Only 2 things determine what kind of waves come to affect you. Kindness and compassion create positive waves that support cellular health and biological repair. And the reverse is also true. Anger, envy, resentment, and hatred create negative wave patterns in the energy field surrounding and permeating the body. At the molecular level, those waves come back to the tissue that generated them. They disrupt cellular signaling. They create inflammation at a level that no supplement can fully address. They generate the kind of biological chaos that over years and decades becomes the condition we call cancer, or the condition we call chronic illness, or the condition we call aging too fast. She said to me, "You can take every supplement ever studied, you can, and perfectly, but if you are spending 30 years filling your body with the electromagnetic signature of anger and resentment, you are fighting a fire with one hand while pouring fuel on it with the other." I sat there in that hospital bed, and I felt for the first time in years that someone was telling me the truth, because I thought about my life, not the way I had been thinking about it as something that had happened to me. I thought about it honestly. I thought about the years of conflict, the running feuds with colleagues at work that I had never let go of, the cold silences with relatives that stretched on for years because neither of us would bend first, the relationship with my second husband that had been a war of small cruelties conducted entirely within the privacy of our own home. I had never acted beyond certain limits. I had never been what you would call a violent or a terrible person, but my mind for 30 years of my adult life had been a loop of grievance, a tape that rewound and replayed every slight, every disappointment, every moment when the people around me had failed to treat me the way I believed I deserved to be treated. I had been living inside a constant low-grade fury at a life that was never quite enough, and my body had been bathing in that signal for 30 years. Evelyn left me with something to read. I will not go into all the details of Feldenkrais's teachings here, because it is not something you can summarize in a few sentences and do justice to. And Evelyn herself would tell you that it is something you explore at your own pace. But the core of what I took from it was this: life is not random. What you send out comes back. Your thoughts are not private. They are actions at a wave level, and they act on the medium your body exists within, and that medium responds. I spent the next 3 months doing something I had never done in 67 years of living. I lay in that nursing home bed, and I deliberately, consciously, methodically forgave everyone I had ever held anything against. Not because they deserved it, not because what happened had been acceptable, but because I understood for the first time that Myonger was not hurting them. It was bathing my own cells in its signal every single day of my life. I forgave me first husband. I forgave my second husband. I forgave every colleague, every relative, every person who had disappointed or wronged or overlooked me. I forgave the version of myself that had made so many choices I regretted. I lay in that bed and I thought about love genuinely, not as an exercise but as a practice. I thought with love about the nurses who brought me medication. I thought with love about the autumn trees outside my window. I thought with love about my children and the complicated, imperfect ways we had spent our lives together. I thought with kindness as often as I could, and when resentment came back, which it did, I let it pass and returned to kindness. Combined with the dietary protocol, the MCT oil, the resistance exercise, the metabolic changes I was already making, something began to shift that my doctors could not explain. My blood markers began to change. The inflammation numbers that had been elevated for years began to drop. Within a year of Evelyn's visit, my oncologist sat across from me with a very unusual expression on his face and told me that the imaging showed what he called, in careful clinical language, a complete metabolic response. The cancer cells were gone. He told me I was one of the most unusual cases he had seen in his career. He used the word miracle. I did not correct him because I knew he meant it as the highest compliment he knew how to offer, but I also knew it was not a miracle. It was a correction. I had corrected the diet, corrected the metabolism, and corrected the signal that my thoughts had been broadcasting into the medium my body lives in. I am 105 years old. I have outlived the nursing home, the predictions, and the despair. I have lived alone and independently for 30 years. I cook my own meals. I replanted my garden from seed last spring. I wake up every morning and blend MCT oil into my coffee, and I drink it before I eat anything, and I move my body, and I eat protein, and I protect my metabolic window. And before I do any of that, I spend 10 minutes in the morning thinking with the clearest and most genuine love I can manage about the people in my life, about the world outside my window, about the simple fact that I am still here. The food is 30% of it, a real and important 30% that I would not give up for anything. The other 70% is what kind of waves you are sending. If you are over 60 and you are watching this, Start with the MCT oil in your morning coffee tomorrow. 1 teaspoon blended, fasted before anything else. Do that for a week, and while you are drinking it, start the other work. The work that has no protocol and no dosage. Think about the grievances you've been carrying for years. Think about the people you have not forgiven. Think about the way you talk to yourself at 3:00 in the morning when no one is listening. That inner conversation is not private. At the wave level, your body hears every word. I am 105 years old, and I am still here, and I am telling you that both of these things are true at the same time. The science is real, and the kindness is real, and you need them both. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing from me. I have more to say, and I'm not in any hurry to stop.